we can... maybe I don't need a microphone, sorry. Apologies. Hi, everyone. What a fantastic morning we've had. It's been absolutely fascinating, hasn't it, to kind of dissect the layers of the landscape and get different perspectives from different disciplines that all too often don't talk to each other as much as they could. And I think the concept of landscape is one that comes and goes over the years, but actually I think it demonstrates it still has a hell of a lot of credibility to give us in terms of how we understand how we then take this forward in terms of the ambition that we want to move forward with. So I'm David Rennick, I'm Regional Director for the North for Natural England. I've known Simon for probably about 20 years. When I used to work at the Caterham Flicks and Cars Wetland Project, which obviously includes Star Car. So I think that kind of sense of understanding the layers of the past, how we take forward nature recovery, but how we do that, understanding where the landscapes come from, is really of interest to me. And peat, like nothing else, allows us to strip back those layers, look at that pollen profile, and who doesn't love doing a bit of augering? So I think the main reason I'm here is probably because I'm called David. Let's be honest, it's very easy, isn't it, to have David 1, Part 1, David 2, Part 2. There we go. Okay, so I'm actually from Hull, a post-glacial landscape in its own right. So it's very good to be talking about gravel and glacial deposits. I was lucky enough on Tuesday to get out and have a look at the landscape. And actually, I would disagree about the thorn boundaries. I think they are absolutely fantastic. And I would say that the landscape is a very engaging one. I think there is a value for a lowlander of big skies. And I think actually that's probably part of what our predecessors looked at in that landscape and probably gained a lot of inspiration from. Other than the corn crate calls I heard from Simon's phone, we heard curlew bubbling and throwing in the background. We're going to come on to that shortly with Mary. What we didn't hear was crane, but we could have heard cranes, and we might well do in the future. It reminds me of a John Clare poem where he talks about seeing cranes over the John Clare countryside landscape, but a single crane. And at that point in his life, cranes were probably vanishing from the landscape. So the tragedy of a lone crane actually was what he lamented about in his poem. Now, we may well be the generation who actually says, no, actually, we don't want those lone cranes. We want cranes to return. So I think what we've heard this morning is very much how do we understand the landscape? Yeah, what have we got? Where have we come from? What can we glean from a real deep, dive into what this landscape is all about? The next section of today is really about, so what does that mean for how we choose to manage this landscape? And the question that was asked before was, what will this landscape look like? As if it's a passive thing that we are bystanders of. And I think the fact is, we all need to think about what this landscape should be looking like in the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And we have some influence over that. So at Natural England, we have a mission for building partnerships for nature's recovery, okay? But we can't do that. That's not about us alone. It's about how do we work with you, how do we create the right conditions, and how do we get more and more people to care about landscape and nature. Now, dare I say, we are quite an old room, okay? And we're probably not super diverse either. We all care about this stuff, yeah? But what we need to be able to do is open other people's eyes, to what we care about. And we're probably not doing well enough on that. So maybe if you do a seminar like this again, we perhaps need a slightly wider demographic, a younger audience as well. That's a challenge I give to you. We're starting to get some of the tools that we need to do this, but tools are boring, policies are boring. We could get really good plans, strategies. We could get fantastic calculations about the metrics of biodiversity net gain. But if we don't have human beings to properly put that to use in the right way, in a robust way, in a fair way, then we'll have failed. So local nature recovery strategies are something that local authorities across the UK, England, are developing at the moment. It's a chance for us to set out for a given area, and North Yorkshire are doing theirs. What is the ambition for landscapes, nature in this patch of the world? This project needs to feature strongly in that strategy. So get out there, engage, make your voices heard. So without further ado, I could whisper on for a lot longer. I'll perhaps say a few things at the end. I think this afternoon we've got a fantastic range of speakers, and we're gonna gradually move towards Simon and Emma, who are going to talk to us about the project and how we're taking all this forward. But firstly, we're really lucky to have Mary Colwell here, who is, I think, an iconic voice in conservation for this generation, and I think an award-winning journalist, broadcaster, and obviously, if you've read her books, really inspiring voice and influence. So I'll hand over to Mary. There'll be a chance for questions shortly, but welcome to the stage. Thank you very much.
Got a clicker? Oh, there it is. Thank you. So absolutely no pressure at all. And I agree with you, David, too. That if we don't take society with us, if all we do is concentrate on the policy and the metrics and the statistics and the legislation, nothing will work. Because unless you have a society that deeply loves and cares what they live around and with and in the midst of, nothing will work. So that's why I've been so passionate to try to get natural history out in terms of the work on Curlews, but also with the Natural History GCSE, because every single child in this country has a right to access that wonder and that joy that is nature. Not to think of this planet as just a problem that's got to be solved, but as something that gives you a reason to get up in the morning because it's just so damn wonderful. Okay, and let's go on to damn wonderful things. Thank you. Okay, so just for a minute, we've heard so much this morning about really fascinating stuff about the past landscapes and the people that used to live here. This isn't a place which has suddenly got a lot of people in it. It's always, for a long, long time, had people in it. And they all have heard this sound, all of them. And I tell you, you are so lucky to live in a part of the world where you still hear this sound. So let me just play it and just shut your eyes or just let it take you to where it takes you and join those countless generations, those throngs of people going back into deep time, all of whom would have heard this. One of the most poetic sounds in nature, isn't it? I mean, it's a piece of poetry, really, as well as being a song that the bird uses to define its territory, or I'm here, come and mate with me, and all the stuff, the biological stuff that goes behind it. To us, it's landscape poetry, or it is to me. So they have been flying around here for a long time. That was recorded literally just over in the Yorkshire Dales. That sound, and it was recorded at 3 a.m. Such a magical time to be anywhere with the natural world, isn't it? So curlews have been around, and anybody who knows them, I'll tell you, not that many people do know what a curlew is, but if you do know them, you tend to love them, and who wouldn't? But their position is precarious. And I think if you see them a lot, if they come back every year, if you hear that sound a lot, you may not be aware of how bad the situation is for curlews. So my job today is to lay out the sort of big picture, and Simon will fill us in on the more detail of this particular area. But be aware you live in a hotspot, and please treasure it. So the UK has lost over half, probably getting now on for 60% of its breeding curlews in just 20 years. And in some cases, far worse than others. So you can see the BTO maps there of the numbers declining right down to 0. The darker areas on the map of UK and Ireland here are where they're missing, where they're going, the decline in density of them. Just look at what's happened to Ireland. Just look at the car crash, which is Ireland. In the 1990s, there were about 5,000 to 7,000 breeding pairs of curlews in Southern Ireland. Last year, there were 98. Okay? In Wales, there used to be, in the 90s, nobody knows because no one was counting, but around 2,000 to 3,000, 4,000 pairs of breeding curlews, probably now 300. Okay? So the BTO reckon the curlew will be extinct as a breeding bird in Wales in 10 years. In 10 years. Right? That's on our watch that we've let this happen. So we've lost around about 120,000 birds in 20 years. That's 5,500 birds a year disappearing. And so in 2015, a paper came out in British Birds that said it should be the most pressing bird conservation priority in the UK, which took a lot of people by surprise, actually. And that only appeared, I didn't see that in any of the major press. That only came out in British Birds, which I think is basically read by pretty hardcore birders, really. But because it was a bird I loved, I kind of picked up on that, and I was working at the BBC at the time, and thought, what is going on? So, a map. Below that black hockey stick line, there are possibly only about 1,000 pairs left. So that's the whole of Ireland, the whole of Wales, the whole of southern England, 1,000 pairs. By far, the heartland of the curlew is in this northern upland chain and into Scotland. They estimate about 58, I'm not sure I agree with it, but anyway, the official estimate, 58,000 breeding pairs, and they're roughly divided half and half between Scotland and England. And the rest is just clinging on. And the reason they are clinging on is because they are so vulnerable. If they get to adults, if they get to 2 years old, they're going to hang on quite well. They'll probably, and the oldest one I know of, lived to 35. So they do live a long time. And adult survival year on year through the winter is really good, around 90% or so. It's this stage, it's the nesting stage now, when they're coming back to breed. This is the danger time for curlews and other ground nesting birds. So when I say curlews, think of it as an umbrella for lapwing, for skylark, for oystercatcher, for golden plover, for all those other birds that lay their eggs on the ground. Because by laying them on the ground, what they're doing is putting their next generation 100% in our hands. We farm the ground, we put buildings on the ground, we walk across it, we do our sport on it, we shoot over it, we drive on it, we do whatever we do on the ground. And so these birds are trying to find a little bit of space in which to survive and bring up their young on the ground. And what we do, one of the things that we've done, changed enormously, and we heard about that this morning, is the farming, how much farming has changed. From the Neolithic, for sure, but also from pre-war, when everything was a bit slower paced and hay cut later in the summer, to now big silage production. And I know that's an issue that quite a lot of lowlands around here face. We have a lot of livestock to keep going through the winter and to feed all year round, and demand for silage is very high. So silage cutting in some places starts in April and goes every 8 weeks until the autumn. Nothing that nests on the ground can nest and get their young away in 8 weeks. So silage cutting, we know, is a big issue. High levels of mesopredators. Predation is a massive, massive issue for curlew. And because of the way we use our farmed landscape, because of the way that we have food, a lot of food around in our urban landscapes, just because of the way we create the habitats today, generalist predators do very, very well. And we have the highest density of foxes and crows in Europe. Okay. So the lovely lady I was speaking to grabbed a conversation with earlier from Darley Beck, Curlew Project. Correct me, 40 pairs of curlews you were monitoring last year. 2 chicks survived. Okay. Mostly due, in that case, to predation, mostly. So it's not a subject people like to talk about. It's a subject which gave everybody a little bit uncomfortable, but it's real. Okay. So farming techniques and the intensification of farmed land, predation, an increasing problem, particularly in the uplands, the spread of forestry, big pressure to plant trees at the moment, A lot of that tree planting is targeted for rough grassland where you don't really grow much food. Don't want to put your trees where we can grow food, so it goes on all the other spaces, and that takes up the habitat for most of our waders in Britain. So there's a really difficult balance between trees and our need for trees, but leaving enough space for those precious ground nesting birds. So taking all that into account, well, I didn't actually know all that. And the reason I found out all that was in 2016, setting out on a walk from the west of Ireland, through Wales, dip down into Shropshire, and then over to the Wash. And the idea of this 500-mile curlew walk was to try to work out why they were disappearing. And those things I've just mentioned came up time and time again, with the added issue in Ireland of peat cutting, where the destruction of the peat bogs has been almost wholesale, almost 100%. And that peat has largely been turned into farmland or burnt in power stations. So one of the reasons the curlew's done so badly in Ireland particularly, and rapid intensification of farmland over there. So I wanted to walk through the places where curlews still sing in the fields and on the moors, to those places now where they've fallen silent, and to those where they're just hanging on, and the people doing fantastic work to try and keep them going. And I met a whole variety of wonderful people who showed me around, who taught me through what was happening, and through a whole spectrum of conservation. And it was so interesting to go from one location to another and hear a completely different worldview, but those different worldviews were united behind the curlew. And one of the people that was very formative in my thinking is Tom Bolton, who's sitting over there, who owns a moor not very far from here. But there were people in lowland farmlands, there were poets and artists and musicians and bird watchers and members of the public. Everybody I could talk to had their own ideas about what a curlew is, what it means to them, and how they want to see them coming back. So that's me, finishing on the Wash. And I look so happy. Have you seen that little face there, smiling? Saying, oh, I know what's going wrong now. I know. I'll just go back and I'll just tell people what we need to do. And it'll all be fine. Yeah. Yeah, right. We do know what to do. There's no doubt. And since that photo was taken in 2016, we've learned an awful lot more about we know what to do. Do we do it? And is the will to do it? And can we get over our differences to make it happen? That's where the issue is. So my book, Curlew Moon, shameless plug, follows that walk and lays out a lot of the issues that are found in there. So coming back, first thing I did was organise 4 national conferences, one in Ireland, one in Scotland, one in England and one in Wales, and brought together a wide range of people to say, do we all know what's going on? What should we do about it? And each one of those national meetings came up with some initiative. I also started World Curlew Day, April the 21st. Engrave that in the heart of your soul, April the 21st, because it gives you a day to do something. If you're not a conservationist or a big landowner or something like that, but you want to help curlews, you could do something like have a coffee morning to raise some money, go out on a walk, talk to your kids about it, visit a school, give a talk, write a poem, sing a song, whatever. My little charity, Curlew Action, runs a poetry and art competition, and this year, a curlew cake competition. And so you can do something that helps raise awareness and gets people understanding the issues and the danger the birds are facing. Has anyone started a World Day? Do you know how you start a World Day? You just say it. You literally just say it. You just say, great, everybody, there's a World Curlew Day on April the 21st. That's it. Get your cousin to draw a logo, and you're off. And now World Curlew Day is recognised in America, in Australia, across Europe. We've had entries to our competitions from right round the world, South America as well. Because it's World Curlew Day, not just Eurasian Curlew Day. Clever. So that happened. Curlews, God, they take you to amazing places, curlews. I never knew. When I stood on the Wash in 2016, if I'd known what was going to happen, it was amazing. So look where I am. And look at all those really important people with me in number 10, sitting in their dining room, I think, talking about how we're going to get some policy together to work out what's going on. That was an important meeting and another stepping stone after those 4 national meetings to get people talking about the next steps. But it's quite hard to get anything to happen unless you've got somebody with real welly behind you and alongside you, not just behind you. And who knew that then Prince Charles, now King Charles, loves curlews? He really loves them. And he organised 2 symposia of his own, one in a hotel in Dartmoor, and one in Highgrove. And if somebody told me that I was going to be sitting next to King Charles, I might have made a bit more of an effort with my dress, but I didn't know till that morning. And there's Tom, look, sitting next to me. And it was those 2 meetings were formative because King Charles does have the ability to make things happen. And I'll tell you one quick story about that. At that Dartmoor meeting, we'd been talking about the issues, and someone in the audience said, well, I think we should get the BBC to make a documentary on curlews, and then everybody would be much more aware. And because of my background, I answered and said, well, really, that's never going to happen because curlews don't have teeth and they don't eat antelopes. So they will never make a documentary on curlews. They're just not sexy enough. And King Charles, I'm sure I'm allowed to say this, aren't I, Tom? But he said, well, I entirely disagree. He said, I think curlews are damnably sexy. So, and so they are. And so it takes someone like King Charles, Prince Charles then, to say, right, guys, enough talking, do something, get yourselves together. And so I'll come back to that later. So he said, get something together. And that was taken in February. That's a group of 108 field workers gathered in a barn in Norfolk, a Curlew Action event, bringing field workers together. Such has been the rise in interest of trying to save curlews, we could fill a barn and have a waiting list of people who want to know more about what they can do to protect the curlew. Such has been the increase in interest over the last few years. That's a BTO map. Look how exponentially curlew interest and projects are growing. And some of the interesting statistics and facts and science that are coming out of those projects, one is from Nicola Hemmings in Sheffield, who somebody wrote in to the Curlew Recovery Partnership, I'll tell you about in a minute, and said, do you know what? I'm finding a lot of broken curlew eggshells. Why is that? And someone in Sheffield University picked it up. Nicola Hemmings did some analysis of lots of curlew eggs. Everybody was sending her their broken curlew eggs. And it turns out that curlews have a significantly higher breakage rate and failure rate of the egg shells than other wild birds. If you think of the wild bird background rate around 10%, curlews is around 16%. What's going on? And her analysis showing it's not pesticides, it's not aging. What is it? What is it? Is it climate change? Could be. She doesn't know yet. Work in progress. We're also finding out just how interdependent we are with Europe. So it's easy to think of our curlews here in Yorkshire or mine down in the Somerset Levels or Gloucestershire Fields or something. These are Europe's, the Eurasian curlew. And the projects that have all been doing of tagging curlew, of which Tom has been fantastic work with that, we're understanding just how much these birds travel, how dependent we are on the whole of Europe to keep their lives going. So think of these as European birds and collaboration across Europe as being essential to their survival. So if I'm standing in a wet field in Gloucestershire in the winter, 60% of the winter feeding curlews in front of me will be from Finland. 50% of the wintering birds that come over into the Somerset Levels are from Germany. We can't think of these creatures in isolation. They are European birds. But they don't just migrate in the winter. Rachel Taylor here from the BTO has been putting GPS tags on breeding birds and seeing how the birds are using the landscapes in the breeding season. And they travel all over the place in the breeding season. They do nest, they have a nest, and they're quite faithful to their nest. But they're all over the show when they're not sitting on the nest. feeding kilometres away very often. And at night roosting, a curlew on the moor here, if it's not sitting on its nest, its partner may well go 5-6 kilometres away for the night. In the dead of night, come back as it gets light. So what curlews are doing and what the science is showing us is that these birds use whole landscapes. So you can't just think of it as, I've got to protect that nest. I've got to protect this landscape, which is why big landscape, collaborative, working together projects like you've got here are vital for the future of birds that use landscapes like curlews. So we've got to protect the fields where they preferentially go to feed, which may be nowhere near where their nest is. You've got to protect those wet mires where they like to roost at night. You've got to protect the whole lot and look at the world through curlew eyes, not just through human eyes, or whatever species it is that you've fallen in love with. Because the world looks different. You remember those old of us, before there was ever a smartphone, we used to have kaleidoscopes. Remember that? And you looked in and you shifted it and all went changed. With each twist, the whole picture changed in the middle. Well, that's what it's like when you start. You've got to picture a human picture. Twist the dial and everything looks very different. Our landscapes look very different if you're trying to live in it like a bird. The use of drones with heat-seeking cameras on the bottom to help find nests, because nests are really difficult to find in grasslands, long grasslands, not so bad up on the moors, but if you're in a wet meadow, as the grass grows very quickly during the spring and summer, you can't see a nest for anything. The Netherlands, particularly good at this. Really, really good at using heat-seeking drones to find nests. And we're trialling it in other places as well. When I say we, not me, people doing the work, but I kind of like to say we. Big use of electric fences as well to keep ground predators, foxes and badgers, away from nests. So in the middle of that electric fence will be sitting a curlew nest, and it gives them a fighting chance to at least get the birds through to 2 to 3 days old when they escape from the nest, and then they go wandering widely. They still have a huge predation rate. So it doesn't stop predation later on, but at least you've got them out of the egg. And that is having knock-on effects to just getting more birds to have a chance. Things like temperature loggers that tell us in the nest, tell us the time of day when the nest goes cold, and if it's at night time when suddenly the temperature goes cold, that means the bird is off the nest and it's probably been predated at night, which points to something like a fox. If it's a daytime, it's probably something like a crow or a raven. But it also could be a sheep. And that's one of the things that the increase in use of nest cameras is showing, is that sheep love eating curlew eggs. Or eggs, basically. So they come along and they shove the bird off the nest. Look at that one, trying to protect it. And sometimes they do manage to fight them off. But you see how vulnerable they are to so many pressures out there. The situation got so bad in some places, and the Darley-Beck statistic I heard today was just very typical of many lowland landscapes. Say, for example, and other landscape, Dartmoor, for example, for the last few years has had one breeding pair left. On the whole of Dartmoor, one breeding pair. 3 males come back, but only 1 female. So they've only ever... And they've, in 22 years, produced 4 chicks in 22 years on Dartmoor. So things are looking pretty bad in some of the lowland and outside the sort of moorland populations. And so head starting was developed. Head starting is a conservation technique which is right on the sort of for species on the edge. So you go out there, you collect all of your eggs, don't leave any. Every nest you can find, take the eggs, take them into captivity, raise them in captivity and release them just as the birds are time to fledge. So you've got them through that danger zone. It's only been going, started small, more and more people are doing it now. It's expensive, it's a crisis measure, it's not a solution. In fact, it's unethical to do it unless you're putting the habitat back, unless you're making it better for those birds to come back and nest in. All of this is happening, the habitat management is getting going, it all depends on elm, it all depends on so many complex factors. But head starting is one tool that's increasingly popular. How am I doing for time? Okay. And that's the head-started birds there in a holding pen. This is on Dartmoor, and they are very sweet. I mean, it's very artificial. They would never be like this in the wild, but you do notice they've got such characters. So some are really sort of stroppy and aggressive and bolshy, and others sort of crouch in the shadows and never want to sort of show their beak, and they're completely adorable. They make these little mini curlew sounds. It's such a privilege to get so close to these birds because you never would really in the wild. Certainly I haven't ever seen that many chicks in the wild because they're so good at hiding. And there they are just about to fledge. They've just been let out. And those birds, that's taken in the Somerset Levels head starting project, and those birds are about to take flight. Their first flight, and you just wonder, you know, has it come to this? And when I did my curlew walk in 2016, someone said to me on that walk, why don't we farm, if it's that bad, why don't we farm curlews? And I remember laughing out loud and said, don't be ridiculous. What? And here we are, farming curlews, in effect. So, there's no doubt the curlew is a special bird. It's one of only 2 birds that's mentioned in the 25-year environment plan that was from 2018, Michael Gove's brainchild, I think. It said, taking this approach will help us improve the overall status of threatened species such as hen harrier and curlew and will help prevent extinction. We will give priority to species in England that are threatened either globally or in the UK, or those that are internationally significant. And the UK is internationally significant for the Eurasian curlew. So, really special. It got a name check. Okay. So where are we now with curlews? Their profile has undoubtedly increased in politics and conservation and with the general public. Undoubtedly. But curlews find themselves embroiled in some of the biggest conservation issues that we face, and which is why I'm so fascinated and embroiled in it all, if you like. Farming policy, predator control, rewilding, public access, shooting, afforestation, renewable energy, and how we work across Europe considering Brexit. I mean, any one of those is enough to give you a major headache. But all of them together are what you have to work with and consider when you're trying to protect the Eurasian curlew. And the future, well, my little charity, Curlew Action, is strengthening ties with Europe and the UK. Curlew Network, we put on that Curlew Fieldworkers Conference, raising awareness around major environmental issues like the webinar series we do and social media, and as we mentioned earlier, spearheading the GCSE in natural history and other ideas which we're taking forward. The Curlew Recovery Partnership, and I did have a slide of the CRP, and I don't know, did I skip over it or something? But the Curlew Recovery Partnership, which came out of the King Charles meeting, is, sorry, I did have a slide to show, it's a unique thing in conservation as far as I can see. The CRP, as we call it, is a round table of major organisations that are involved in curlew recovery. So, now I'm going to get it wrong, Tom, so you're going to have to help me. So, there's Bolton Castle Estate, there's Curlew Action, but there's the RSPB, the BTO, the WWT, Natural England, the Duchy of Cornwall, Curlew Country, which is a project down in Shropshire, and there's one more. GWCT, thank you. So 9 organisations that sit around the table. Tom represents Bolton Castle Estate. I'm the chair, and a guy called Ryan Burrell is the director. And we meet every 2 weeks. And we are being increasingly successful in accessing DEFRA, getting our thoughts across on elms and forestry, and updating what's called the Curlew Fieldworker Toolkit, which soon will be a really vibrant resource. It's there already, but we need to get stuck in now, update it, and make it accessible right across the board. So if you think of the CRP, it's a sort of, it's the behind-the-scenes policy and fieldwork side. And the strength of the CRP is that we have this broad spectrum of organisations. And between us, we come up with policy statements, if you like, statement policy. We come up with statements, agreed statements, that we can then show to ministers or to people or to policymakers saying, this is what we think about silage, this is what we think about predation. And it's agreed from right across the board. And that's a really powerful tool to have, actually, and very valued, I think, by people who are trying to make big decisions for the future. Could there be a more loved bird, really? Could there be a species that's got more behind it than the curlew? Just me just outlining some of the stuff that's going on? I don't know. Are we winning? Are we winning? Ask me on a good day, and I'll say, oh, God, absolutely. It's so inspiring what's happening. And we just need to do a bit more, and we just need to, and we just need to, and we just need to. Ask me on a bad day, and I'll say, not a chance. Not a chance, because the interests behind what's destroying the environments for birds like curlew are so enormous. The pressure is so great. The trend is so forever to increase in intensity and make our mark on the world that non-economic species like curlew, just birds that sing and make us happy and give us joy and things that inspire us to write poetry or paint a picture, they don't really figure on anybody's spreadsheet. You know, they just sit in here. So when somebody asked me, and in fact it was you, Tom, you asked me, what, I probably don't remember, what would you say to a young conservationist coming through? And I wrote a blog about it, actually, because it made me think, what would I say to a young conservationist setting out who wants to make a difference? And I said, you know, I don't know, but all I can do is talk about from my own experience. But you pick something to love, and you just damn well love it. You love it with every fibre of your being, and you make a difference. And it doesn't matter how many times people put you down, how many holes you fall into, how many times you get it wrong, and I get it wrong a lot. But as long as I get a bit more right than I get wrong, then we'll keep moving forwards. So whatever it is, I don't know whether we'll win, but at least I'm trying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mary. That was fantastic. So we've got a little bit of time for a few questions for Mary, actually, before we break for a quick loo break. I mean, I think, you know, curlew are in a way a microcosm, aren't they, of the connection between uplands, lowlands, that shifting baseline that we talked about earlier on. You know, lots of people think of them as an upland bird. We would have seen them in the lowlands, and I think that, you know, land use across the UK, we need to think about how we accommodate these species, not just where they are now, but where they need to be. So, questions. Who wants to ask a question? And if I could ask you to use the microphone, and I might just repeat your question back so everybody can engage with what you're asking. And then, if you wouldn't mind, after you've asked, hang on to it.
Thank you, Mary. Christopher Bornarton. Some of us are very lucky still to hear the curlews, you say, and there are some of us, like Tom, who have the ability to look after curlews to some extent. But I wouldn't be as pessimistic as you, because I think, yes, land use is changing, but David Hill will tell us all about biodiversity, net gain, and natural capital and other things, which actually will make farmers and landowners look a little bit more carefully about how they manage their land and why they manage their land, and some of the less productive land that they have will be used for other things than straight agriculture. And those things and some of those schemes, I think, could be massively important for birds like curlew and other ground nesting birds, together with predation control.
That goes behind you. Yes. Yes. I mean, yes, of course there's potential. It's just we need the uptake and we need the money behind it. So it's very easy to say, very not at all secure that will actually happen at the scale and at the quality that we need it to happen to protect birds like the curlew. Because we don't just need that field over there protected, we need that landscape protected, and we need agreements over a wide range of stakeholders within that landscape. So yes, the potential is there, but that's why I say I oscillate, I blow hot and cold. But as it stands right as it is today, we're not quite there. Yeah.
I think you'll get there. I think we'll get there because of the scale of it and because of the diversity of
I hope you're right.
Okay, can we move on to the next question then? Gentleman at the back.
Do we know if any of the birds head started in the UK migrate to Europe, or do they stay
Yes,
in
they've
the UK?
been. Yes, they have, and the Gloucestershire birds have been found in France, for example. Do you know any more, Tom? They go to Europe? I know certainly they go to France.
Republic of Ireland.
Oh, Republic of Ireland for sure.
And obviously France, we know that birds do go to France.
Yeah.
Just, well, I've got the microphone. The cracked eggs that you mentioned, I've been talking quite a lot about that, and I think it increased last year. I think there is a slight fear among those of us involved. It potentially the level of monitoring and actually having to visit nests and, doing that for the curlews benefit in terms of gathering evidence, but also potentially dog walkers, things like that, because they are a relatively large bird. When they're flushed directly from the nest, rather than being able to sort of scurry away from it and then flush, there is, I think, becoming increasingly a little bit concerned that we need to be incredibly careful that, monitoring nests, we need to actually make some noise further away and make sure they get off the nest before they flush, just for anyone that's involved in monitoring them.
I think, I can't remember the details now, and I'll go back and look at the paper, but quite often fail at the same stage. So it's like a stage in development, which would suggest it's something maybe more systemic than that. But she's only got 2 years of data, so it's too early to say, but it could well be a factor. Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just, hands up again so I can see who's got wants to ask a question? Okay. So time for a couple more.
Well, a quick one. The head-started birds, the young ones, are they site faithful when they've migrated? Do they come back to where you
A bit early to tell definitively, not particularly, to be honest. Quite a few of the head-started birds just seem to go and find a group and go to where that group goes to. So, for example, a bird that was head-started in the Severn and Avon Vales actually bred in Oxfordshire. So, yes and no. Again, it's very early days. We're right at the beginning of this, and we need a few more years of data to work out. But it's not obvious that they're immediately coming back to where they were head-started.
A large proportion of the upland areas in Britain are devoted to shooting. And I just wonder if you've got any opinions on the impact of that on the curlew population.
Are you talking about driven grouse shooting at the moment?
In our area, it's red grouse shooting, yes. But and also obviously the shooters do deal with some of the predators that you were talking about. You know, the foxes and the crows. I mean, they love having a bash at them. So I'd just be interested to know what you think about the overall picture on that.
Okay, so curlew do well on grouse moors. They do particularly well on the rough grasslands that fringe the grouse moor. So they may nest on the grouse moor. They're feeding much more widely than that. It's no surprise, though, that curlew do well on these managed landscapes because they're managed for ground nesting birds. They're managed for red grouse. So, of course, ground nesting birds are going to do well. And while the rest of the UK is in such a dire straits, as I pointed out, I'm very, very in favour of keeping these hotspots going because otherwise we'll lose them. I think, though, in terms of a model that you can roll out across the country, that's different. I don't think you can, or probably want to, or should, roll out that intensity of management much more widely. But at the moment, a legal, well-run grouse moor is keeping our populations of waders going, without a doubt.
Okay, thank you. We might just have a chance for one final question if anybody did want to ask anything. Yeah.
One of the issues that you mentioned is obviously the cutting of silage, whether it's 2, 3, 4 cuts a year, particularly in the lowlands, I suspect. What do you or Curlew Action think on kind of how to potentially incentivise farmers to manage the land to mitigate those losses from silage cutting? Yeah,
no, it's a really big question, and it's actually the Curlew Recovery Partnership, the round table I was talking about, which is managing a natural England. I get all these acronyms, they drive me nuts. what is it? The Curlew solution. Oh, anyway.
Landscape recovery scheme.
No, it's another one. Curlew Solutions Trialling, which is part of a species recovery program. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, one of those with lots of similar sounding acronyms, which has got a series of projects around the country, which is working specifically with farmers in lowland areas to look at different interventions to help inform future policy. And silage mitigation, can you actually pay farmers to not produce silage? That's a really difficult question because I'm not a dairy farmer, but silage isn't silage. It varies quite dramatically. So you have lots of factors to take into account. And also, it is a very expensive thing to do. So, but we're trying to get the answer to that for sure. Yeah, and it's definitely on the radar, quite high up on the radar.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for the questions. Excellent. Okay, we're going to take a quick comfort break now. We've got just over 10 minutes, but if you could all be back in your seats at past, ready to restart, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. So we're going to now hand over to Simon, who's going to talk about the work of the Trust, and then who's going to hand over to Emma, who's going to further talk about the work of the Trust. So thank you very much, Simon.
Okay, good afternoon. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the morning as much as I have, because I think it's just so exciting to get a sense of setting, and it's just so wonderful to have had the amazing talk about the Curlews. And I think, in a way, what strikes home is you look at the satellite imagery of the core area of that Curlew, and to recognise the fact those Curlew are not staying put. You can't just stick them within a red line and say that's a nature reserve. These birds are moving around. So how crucially important it is to work at landscape scale. Which brings me to landscape scale, very neatly. So what is special about the Ure Valley? I think you probably getting the foundations built on understanding the history, understanding the geology, the hydrogeology, and in a way that was sort of touched upon. Take an example here. That these are the two southern henges, northern henge just off the top of there. This is Nosterfield Quarry, and I'll mention it a little bit more later. What's so interesting is because it is on the left-hand side on the map here, on the magnesian limestone, that is a massive major aquifer with water fluctuating. And I would suggest to you that during the Mesolithic, the Neolithic periods, just as it is today, the water fluctuated, just as it does on our reserve at Nosterfield, by 3-5 metres. What we know is the upper water level is probably 6 metres higher than it is currently on Nosterfield Quarry. So that water fluctuation's gone on through the millennia. And that in itself makes it absolutely fascinating. And so it is, that's why I've, over the years, become more and more interested in what makes a landscape tick. So, on a little bit now. We start, let's say, with the artery of the Lower Ure, and we've already, we all live here. We know where it starts and finishes. I've still got to say it is rather shocking that when it gets south of Borough Bridge, it reaches up with this miserable little ooze beck and becomes the ooze. There's something very wrong there. It should be the Ure all the way out to Spurn. Anyway, that's another point. So what's special about the Ure? Well, there are so many things that are special about the Ure, but a big part of it is what we don't know. The river leech was discovered, and Martin says he's going to test me later on, so I'm getting very worried that I'm going to get the date wrong. But it was either in 2004 or 2006. It's new to science. And yet, if we take a plant like Swedish pondweed, frankly, it's a pondweed. So what, you might say. But actually, this is the Ure and the Wharf just here. They're the only sites in the whole of England for it. It's a hybrid between two pondweeds. So you think, oh God, it's even more boring than I thought it was. But actually what's so interesting about that hybrid, it cannot fertilise. It is infertile. And it's the fennel pondweed has moved right up to the north up here. And so now, because of climate change, this has been left behind in the Ure and the Wharf, a remnant from earlier colder times. So it is literally a reservoir. So this photo is West Tanfield Bridge. The last record on the River Wharf was between 2000 and 2010. The last record on the Ure was 1993. So over 30 years ago was the last record for that site. Have we lost it, or do we simply not know? I think one of the key things is there is still so much to know, so much to understand. I'm sorry, I know it's not a very interesting plant to look at, but I hope it emphasises just how little we do know. So the River Ure, just in that immediate vicinity, that photograph there is Ripon Loop, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust Ripon Loop, before it breached through. It probably could be called Ripon Shoot now, as Arvid suggested. But these river shingles are incredibly important for a range of different species. And as you move back onto the sandy areas, plants such as Yellow Star or Bethlehem, which the Ure is by no means unique to, but it's a stronghold in Britain for that very beautiful species. Thistle broomrape. Gosh, what a name. The other alternative name, which I favour, is Yorkshire broomrape. It only occurs in Yorkshire. That's the distribution map for it on this side. So again, it's the Wharf and the River Ure. It's a plant that parasitises thistles, creeping thistle particularly. And it pops up sometimes in the oddest of places. It even turned up on our reserve well away from the river corridor. But it's one of those plants that makes it really special. And I think it's rather beautiful. I don't know what you think. I think it's a rather stunning and lovely plant. Now, I've got to be so careful here with substance hollows and glacial kettle holes. Maybe we should be calling them dough lines. Now, I know from Arvid, I got ticked off by calling them gypsum swallow holes or substance hollows. These are really special parts of the landscape because, again, we go back to the discussion, back to the geology to understand where those gypsum faults have occurred and left these very interesting areas. And objectively, you get sites, the main picture on there is Sherry Mars, which got mentioned earlier on and was one of the coring sites. Why has that survived? Probably because you can't get a big piece of machinery onto it. It's a big, deep hole, and if you walk across it, well, certainly if I walk across it, it wobbles quite a lot. And you just can't get a machine into there, so it's actually managed to help save that site. But in other areas where these cattle holes have remained, you get areas down here. This is on private land west of Midland, so just on the edge of our immediate area. That is great fence edge. We know from plant macrofossil pollen data, plant macrofossil data, I think it would be, that it occurred sometimes in abundance within our area. There are 6 sites left for us in Yorkshire now. So that's a key plant we've picked up on, and we're now propagating, and I will leave Emma to tell you all about that. And what's so exciting is for this scarce plant, we're putting it into the ground and it is romping away. It really wants to grow here. And it's only really through man's activity that we've removed it. So it's exciting to be able to put them back. And that applies to Carex elata, tufted sedge, thank you. Which again is actually, oddly enough, to the west there of Midland, but it occurs in a number of sites up and down the valley, and it's very much characteristic of that type of habitat. Fens, maars, seepages, again, we're back to the geology, the hydrogeology, the way the water seeps out of the limestone. And there are little patches left. Some, there's odd bits of SSSI, but they are really small and they've been heavily cultivated around. But they're incredibly important. So the left-hand plant is blunt-flowered rush. It may not look the most exciting habitat on face value, but it's actually full of really interesting insects. And it's these low-lying areas where the seepage, and that's quite often associated with tufa seepages as well. Magnesian limestone. Well, I showed you the picture at the beginning with the pink, the southern magnesian limestone. This is the northern section up in Durham. The southern section starts at Bedale and it goes down to Nottinghamshire. It's a very narrow little strip. And I can't remember the area now of magnesian limestone left in Britain, but it's tiny. And actually much of that was mapped originally down in the Selby area and has been lost. So we've an awful lot less than the last figures. So it really is very special indeed. And, it occurs, I was just talking to Sarah here at Fountains Abbey. There's a patch of it just near the banqueting hall at Fountains Abbey. These special little areas, they just aren't extensive areas, and naturally they are very much under threat, but really important for butterflies such as dingy skipper. Again, not the most lovely thing, but it's a really, really nice butterfly. Woodland. How do you define that? There's so much talked about with ancient woodland. And what comes out of ancient woodland is that, unlike what everyone talks about these days, is rewilding by sticking in some trees in plastic tree tubes. That is not woodland. That is just planting some trees for the sake of it. The ground flora, the deadwood, the lichens, the mosses within that, it's that whole habitat. And they're incredibly important. Again, I think you've seen this photograph earlier on because I think Jim and I shared it. This is Hack Fall. And a classic example of this is that plants such as woodrush are growing in there. And Charlie, you're going to have to save me. I've forgotten the name of the, where are you, Charlie? Moths. What were the moths? Key moths?
All the various ones, there's various Alakista species and things on woodrush.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I knew I should have made some notes, Helen. Yep. So that leads me on to mention moths in the broader sense, because Charlie and my wife and others have been moth trapping in this area for 30 plus years. And within 6 sites between Ripon and Massam, recorded over 1,000 species of moths. That's 60% of Yorkshire's moths. And you've got to bear in mind there's coastal moths and there are upland moths. So that is pretty remarkable. Here we are in the centre of the country with such a wide range, but not least of all, very, very lucky to have outstanding observers. And I probably have to let you into a secret of the fact that Charlie's caught over 900 species in his not all natural habitat. So there we go. But to give you a bit of a sense here, again, where the unknown factors are, Ediophasia mettingiella, it was my best go at it anyway. They think it's with one plant, but it Charlie's suspicion is that it's actually feeding on large bittercress. Again, it's one of those unknown factors. But was it something like 24 out of 25 records for the whole of Yorkshire have been in this immediate area? So it's a hotspot. A really classic example of that is double kidney, and again, a classic example of where we still need to know more. And we do know a lot in this day and age. They are willow feeders, and there's still a lack of clarity over exactly what they're feeding on. Even though this is a hotspot, even though there's some very good people looking, we think it may be feeding on purple willow. But there may be a number of different factors. And so I just want to sort of get over how, one, it gives us a picture by looking at some of the rarer moths that are very much centred around this area. There are a certain range of plants, typically, and I show them on the right-hand side, such as bladder campion, which is netted pug on the bottom. That's a real special for Nosterfield Gravel Pit and Nature Reserve. We've got bladder campion growing there in quantity, and that beautiful little moth turns up there. Buckthorn, I'm not going to go through the full list, but this demonstrates how we can pick out on certain species, such as small-leaved lime, which is really just in Hack Fall, and say, it just really highlights how important those remnants of habitat are. There we go. Right, now breeding birds. Videos, I'm glad that started. Tom at Bolton Castle Estate has been mentioned, and these are the ospreys breeding at Bolton Castle. I think Tom would agree, we met a few years ago and talked about curlews and how important it was to put colourings on them. And I mooted to Tom, would you think about putting up an osprey nest platform? A couple of years later, Tom very thoughtfully put up a couple of nest platforms. However, and this is teach me to open my mouth, this same pair of curlew that you see in that photograph were bringing nest material into the nest we'd put up at Nosterfield, and they went off to Tom's instead. But hey, they're in Yorkshire and they're in the Ure Valley, so there we go. Right, birds. Sorry, I'll just go back a moment there. What's been so valuable, and again it comes back to this thing of working with partners on landscape scale, is that by working with Tarmac, we've been able to work on that landscape scale. We've managed to get the first avocets to breed. Mediterranean gull, we still haven't managed to get them to fledge, but they've produced chicks and the old fox has come along and gobbled them, but we'll get there one day as a proving species. I don't know what's going on with this, it keeps changing. And bittern. Bittern needs a large reed bed, and it needs the right fish. People used to talk about the fact that it needed 20 hectares of reed bed. No, it doesn't. If you go to Eastern Europe, they'll nest in relatively small fish ponds with the right fish, the right conditions. And we set out with a load of volunteers and we planted 28,500 reeds at Nosterfield. Not mentioning any names, but a certain sort of high-level environmentalist said we were wasting time creating reed beds for bittern in North Yorkshire because they don't occur in North Yorkshire. They didn't occur because there was no reed bed. So it's quite simple. You don't always follow what everyone else is doing. You say, what can we do to change things? And I think by taking that line, we've managed to think more broadly and introduce species which otherwise wouldn't have been here. And we've got to be aspirational. David mentioned crane. That's my aspiration. I want to see them there. They should be flying over the henges. And I think what we'll do, Kate, is we'll have World Crane Day centred at Thornborough Henge, even if we haven't got them yet. So, and in terms of numbers of birds, WEBS, the sign up at the top is Wetland Bird Survey. This is every month on a set day, there is a wetland survey to look at the range of birds on a site. And we've been doing this for 20 plus years. And this is for North Yorkshire, and you will spot Nosterfield gravel pits at the top of that. The remaining 6 at the top of that list are all SSSIs. So this is a really important site, and that has come about through working in partnership with the minerals industry to manage the land sympathetically, and surrounding landowners also to do so. But I'm going to sort of point you a little bit towards some of the other sites in there. So Higgs Nature Reserve is just down from us at Nosterfield, north of Ripon. Staveley is a little south of there. You've got Bolton-on-Swale and Scorton on the Swale. Ripon Racecourse, obviously, just downstream, and Snape and Carthorpe Mires just off to the north. And actually Snape and Carthorpe Mires, which is where the leach factory was that was referred to earlier, this last couple of years has been full of water during the winter. It has been quite spectacular, with upward of 2,000 pink-footed geese coming in to visit. So that's going to climb up the ladder as being important. What I'm trying to get at here is that if you start then looking at the most important sites, and did I miss one there? No, don't worry. The most important 15 sites in the whole of North Yorkshire, and they're all mapped on there. Look how there's a bit of a line. It's rather like Blaise's alignment of henges. You'd think there was something going on, wouldn't you? But up this now north-south line, where the biggest blob is Nosterfield, but how there is a strong surround around the A1 corridor. No great surprise, a lot of it is relating to the mineral companies going in and extracting gravel. So, coming back round, I could go on about so many species, which our area is important for. What we can now ascertain is that it reaches SSSI status for breeding birds on a number of levels. And for specific wintering birds, Curlew is one classic example of that, where we are over 1,200 curlew. Now, there's a question earlier on about the moving backwards and forwards between Europe. What we know is that even though we have never actually managed to ring a bird at Nosterfield, or even at Tom's at Wensley, excuse me, which has actually gone to Scandinavia, I don't believe so anyway yet, they have been seen at Teesside, which indicates the fact they are probably birds that are breeding in Scandinavia and coming to us in the winter. But this is another area where we need to extend the work. Yeah.
Finland. Finland. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. Sorry about the cough. So we've still got an awful lot to learn, but putting a satellite tag on a bird, £1,000 a bird, £1,000 for following it, etc. So, what we can say is that the Lower Ure, if we just take from Jervo Abbey down to Ripon, is nationally important for curlew. If we take the Swale and Ure gravel pits together, it's about 1.5% of the British population are wintering with us. And then we have other species, and Judith, I have not done my homework enough, and I know I'm going to be blown up for it by Martin, but there was Wimbrel, Grey, and Rough, thank you, and Greylag, nationally important numbers, over 1% of the UK wintering population. So it really brings home just what an important landscape is. And you'll appreciate I've only just touched on there's so many species, so many habitats I haven't managed to talk about. The goal is for the government is to make a minimum of 30% of England protected for nature by 2030. That's a big job. And I don't envy David, because it sits on his shoulders as chairman of Natural England, or very largely. So we'll all make sure he does his job. David mentioned the Yorkshire, North Yorkshire and York local nature strategy, which is a great aspiration. One of the biggest problems is it's a huge area. Where we've been talking about the Swale and Ure washlands, that's the size of many counties or a number of counties. So one of the problems with being a huge area is that it can get lost in the mess. So as David indicated, this is a real hotspot, and we need to pick up and identify it and recognise what an important area it is. Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and is Sian here? No, I was hoping she was going to be here, and Alistair Fitter from the Wildlife Trust. But the two of them have been doing wonderful work on the State of Yorkshire Nature Report. And very kindly, I'm sort of part of that steering group. And that's really brought home just how important it is. What's also rather gratifying is that we've looked at the whole of Yorkshire and come to almost identical conclusions that we did 20 years ago for this landscape, that wetland and limestone are the two absolute priority habitats that we need to look after. So, bigger, better, more joined up. And that picture, it says it all. I think Sir John Lawton, when he drew up that report a few years ago, was absolutely on the nail. I don't know, is Nosterfields a stepping stone? Is it a core area now? What I'm absolutely sure about is that we're looking, and it screams the way we looked at maps and so on, this is a corridor with some real hotspots on it. So we've got to try to join those up to create buffer zones, to recognise how important this landscape is. And that's only going to be achievable if we're working at landscape scale to recognise that species like curlew do not stay within a ring of a nature reserve. And there we are, we're back. Nosterfield Quarry, Thornbury Henges. The top picture is on Thornbury Henge, which is smothered in rock rose on this side. And even sitting on the rock rose is a red list pollen beetle. That's nature for you. We're only going to achieve these things by grabbing opportunities. We can draw up maps and say, here are some wetlands, here are some woodlands, let's try and join them up. It is through opportunities that you achieve that. Thank you.
Hello. It's quite loud. It's been quieter. My name is Emma Higgs. I am the project manager for the Lower Ure Conservation Trust, and I am just going to wrap up today by telling you a bit about the trust and what it is that we do in the Lower Ure Valley. That's us, or some of us anyway. Just quickly, I just wanted to mention our funders. So we've got who are currently funding our projects and basically all of the work that you're going to see in this presentation. So we're currently funded by the National History Heritage Fund, who are funding our Ure Connected project. That project is focused on loads of great nature conservation, but also engaging people with nature in the Lower Ure Valley. And the Yorkshire Water Biodiversity Fund is funding our plant nursery and things surrounding that, so expanding priority habitats in the Lower Ure Valley. So thanks to them. So what do we do? So firstly, we manage Nosterfield Nature Reserve, which hopefully most of you will know. You can't really see it very well on here, but this is Ripon here. This is Bedale here. Yep. And Massam, so we're about 15 minutes north of Ripon there. And this is the main reserve, so just what we call the main reserve. Just above the bit at the top there is, I'm going to come to in a minute, that's what we call the well wetlands, which is part of the active tarmac quarry. But this here, the main picture here is our main nature reserve, Nosterfield Nature Reserve. And that is a former quarry as well. So quarried for sand and gravel until the 1980s and then restored for farmland. And it's 60 hectares of wet grassland, well, primarily wet grassland and lagoons. And it's the underlying magnesian limestone, which makes it so special, really. We've heard a lot about the magnesium limestone today. Yes, so it's the underlying magnesium limestone and the associated aquifer, which makes it so special. So there's the natural water table, there's a dramatic difference in the water table, so it can change from 2.5 metres throughout the year. I've got some more pictures of that in a minute. And it was designated a local nature reserve in 2001, and it's the only local nature reserve in the Hambleton area. And it's widely considered one of the best, if not the best, wet grassland site in North Yorkshire. And this is the high water level. In this photo was taken in March, so this is pretty much what it looks like now after a very wet winter. And this is the same area in October. So you can see the difference in water levels, and that's what makes it so good. It's managed primarily for breeding waders and wildfowl, and the drawdown of the water creates those kind of soft, muddy margins which wader chicks like to feed in. So that's one of the things that makes this site so special. And I'll just mention a few of those species now. So curlew, we do have breeding curlew on site, as well as abatet, and we still have good numbers of redshank and lapwing, considering the size of the sites. And also those numbers have remained relatively stable despite declines nationally. So we're doing all right there. Obviously, we could do better. So this is the quarry site, so Well Wetlands. This is the bit north of the main reserve. Like I said, it's part of, this is the main quarry site, so surrounding area is still being quarried, but this part has been handed over to us to manage. And it's 40 hectares of open water reed bed, magnesium limestone bedrock, and fen. Simon mentioned this earlier, but the reed bed here was created in 2003 to 2005 by planting 28,000 reeds, was it? Roughly, by volunteers. And then this area here is magnesium limestone that's been, that was quarried, or it's quarried down to the magnesium limestone, sorry. And we're working on creating limestone grassland there. And there's also areas of fen that we've created around here, or all on sections all around this lake, and that's taken place over the last 5 or 6 years. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Some of the species that we have on that site, bittern, the reed bed is managed for bittern, and they have bred there despite not breeding there for a few years, but we've recently done some work on the reed bed, so we're still hopeful that we'll get them back. Lots of other species as well. Osprey, we've mentioned. They're present throughout the spring and summer most years now, and as Simon said, we've installed in 2021 we installed an osprey platform, so we're hoping that we'll have them breeding here soon. So another big part of what we do is our plant nursery. So this is Pan and Laurie, two of our brilliant volunteers who are here today. And they run the plant nursery where we grow mainly wetland and magnesium limestone, or limestone plants. Around 20,000 plants are propagated in there each year, of which over 100 species now, I think, are being held in there. And we collect seed and plants for the nursery from all over the Ure Valley, but we try and keep our seed or plant sources as local as possible. And there's some very rare plants in there which are becoming close to extinction, either in the Ure Valley or, in some cases, in the whole of the country. So I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. So one of the things we do with the plants that we grow in the nursery is create habitats. So we've created a large area of fen on at the quarry site, were wetlands. After quarrying had created just some very steep-sided, deep holes, but there was an area, a big silt bed, where they'd pumped all their silt, which created about 1.5 hectares of shallow water, and shallow enough to plant in, and shallow enough for plants to grow. So, yes, we used a lot of our wetland plants to create this fen, and trial plots. What have I got next? Yes. So this was what it looked like in April 2017, and in that year, and over the next few years, lots of trial planting was done to try and work out what would work and what wouldn't. I think a lot of things didn't, but what did work, we kind of multiplied and planted all over. And this is what it looked like a few years later, at the end of 2021. So we did a lot of planting in 2021 thanks to so we got some funding from DEFRA via the Green Recovery Fund. So we were able at that point to improve our volunteer facilities and bring in a lot of new volunteers. So there was a lot of planting that happened throughout that spring and summer to get the fen to look like this. Obviously, we're now 2 years on, or well, 2.5 years on, and it's still developing. We're still putting in it's mostly done, but we're still putting in a few more plants. But yes, so that's what we have created. This map here, you probably can't see it very well, but it kind of, it just shows the plant community, so some single species areas and some plant community areas that we've planted. So there's, in the wetter areas, more out in the water, there's things like great fen sedge, which Simon mentioned, bladder sedge, bottle sedge, club rush, common club rush, grey club rush, and then we have also these kind of drier, like floodplain meadow type plant communities with things like meadowsweet, great burnet, tufted sedge, blunt-flowered rush. So we've got a really nice kind of mosaic of habitats in that area. And although this is kind of mostly, this trial area on our site is mostly kind of done now, we're still looking to find other places that our plants can go to so that more of this fen habitat can be created in the Lower Ure Valley. Another big part of what we do is working on magnesium limestone grassland, either enhancing or creating. And this was an area exposed by quarrying. This is on the reserve. So it was kind of bare rock, basically. But over the years, we've done a few things to try and create a bit of, so rather than waiting for it to kind of weather and a substrate that we could plant into, rather than waiting for that to happen, we've tried to scarify the top surface. So this is the most recent area we did with a 40-ton digger, just trying to scrape it all up and create something that seeds will seeds will go into and that we could plant into. This picture up here is our volunteers planting a few years ago. As you can see, they're in a tiny little enclosure, and that's because everything we planted previously just got eaten by rabbits. So we had to create these little enclosures to protect everything. But we've since made some repairs to the rabbit fencing which surrounds this area. And so that meant that last year, we were able to spread green hay on there from another magnesium limestone site. And that is already looking quite promising in that we've got a lot of seedlings and things coming up already. So hopefully if we can keep the rabbits out of there for long enough, then we should see that start to develop quite well. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to whiz through this. That's the magnesium limestone in flower on our site. So as you can see, it's starting to look quite good. Quickly then, just some of the other work we do. This is our hay field, hay meadow on the reserve. And so we do a bit of hay meadow enhancement. So after that, the hay cut's been taken, we spread green hay on there as well, and that's helped increase the species richness of that area. And it's now close to being lowland meadow priority habitat quality. This is just our volunteers doing work in the woodland, creating glades, and doing a bit of Himalayan balsam pulling at the end. So we do quite a lot of rare plant projects, or we're involved in a few rare plant projects, one of which is working with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust on water germander reintroduction at their site, Bolton-on-Swale. This plant now only grows in a few sites in the UK, down in Cambridgeshire. So we have gone down there and taken some plants and seeds from Kingfisher Bridge in Cambridgeshire, where it's doing very well. There's, I think, over 5 million plants on that site. And we are propagating this in our nursery. And last autumn, some of ours and Yorkshire Wildlife Trust volunteers went and planted 160 plants, again, just in an enclosure to protect it. And some more will be going out there this year. Rare spring sedge is another one. That is Laurie, I think. Trying to find some seeds for a very small sedge. And this is restricted just a few limestone sites in Yorkshire, Teesdale and Norfolk. But we have found, this is Burton Leonard lime kilns. So we've propagated plants from seed from there. And we now have that growing in our nursery. So one of the things we do is just act as like an ark. So finding, keeping these rare plants in our nursery, just in case, should anything, bad happen to these sites where they're just holding on, then we've got that plant material in our nursery. There's lots of other projects, as we haven't got much time, I won't talk much about them, but there's just, there's more on top of this as well. But yeah, a lot of these are plants which are just holding on in just a few locations, or scarce tufted sedge is just known from one location in Hertfordshire, and we're growing on plants so that we can, plant more back and keep some in our nursery. And from all the plant work that we've been doing and the habitat creation work we've been doing, we've learned a lot. So we've gathered a lot of knowledge, and we want to share that knowledge so that other people are able to copy what we've done and won't have to go through all the experimental stages that we have. So on our website, these are available. This is just a couple of examples, but there's lots of other ones about how to create certain habitats or how to propagate certain species, plants, or there's kind of safe methods of planting in deep water and lots of kinds of things. And we also, as well as working on just our nature reserve, we work with a lot of partners around the Lower Ure Valley, where we do more nature conservation management. This is Thornborough Henges next door to our reserve, which we've talked a lot about today. But there we're helping to restore the calcareous grassland, ancient calcareous grassland that is present on the Middle Henge here. We're propagating about 10,000 limestone plants from local seed sources, which we hope to plant out there this autumn and next year as well. St John's Church in Sharrow, so this is one of the only species-rich examples of species-rich hay meadow in the Lower Ure Valley. And this has been carefully managed for over 30 years between LUCT, the church, and open country. And that's basically what we do there is this is our volunteers taking a hay cut in the summer, and we use the green hay on our hayfield, which I mentioned briefly earlier. So it's beneficial for the management of the churchyard, to cut and remove the nutrients, but then we can also make use of that hay to create or improve other sites, either on our reserve or elsewhere. Farnham Bank is another one that we manage. So this is a county wildlife site in Farnham, just outside of Knaresborough. And this is magnesium limestone, one of the best, or the best, magnesium limestone verge in the Harrogate area. And it was deteriorating through lack of management. So we identified that it needed help. So we kind of, with agreement from the county council and the parish council, we've adopted this now, and we've taken it on, and we're managing it by taking a hay cut in the summer and a maintenance cut in the autumn, removing all the vegetation, and then we've been in this winter as well to remove some beech trees that were growing, just so that they didn't shade out any of the grassland. This one over here is Sharrow Myers, which has been mentioned a few times today as well. So an ancient bit of fen and wet woodland, unfortunately being taken over by this here, which is red osier dogwood, non-native, and it's invaded quite a lot. So we've been in the last 3 years with the volunteers to try and remove as much of that as we can. So very much a work in progress. There's a lot more to do, but we're making a good headway in there. And the areas that we have now cleared this year, we're hoping to plant back some of the species that have been shaded out by the dogwood. So things like great fen sedge and tufted sedge. Okay, I'll skip through these. Other county wildlife sites that we're working on. Let's get to this bit. Okay, so another big focus of our work is engagement, as I mentioned. So we work with, a focus of the LUCT Project Ure Connected is to engage people with nature, but really focus on people that could benefit from it the most. So we've teamed up with Dementia Forward, who are a local charity, and they focus on helping people with young onset dementia. So that's people that have been diagnosed before they reach retirement age. So quite often they're still physically very able, but but a lot of dementia-based activities and support is aimed at older age groups. So there's a bit of gap in support for them. So we've teamed up with them, and we're putting on activities for them when they come. So things like bird ringing, or they've been doing little tasks like planting. We'd take them on guided walks. Here we're just doing a bit of leaf printing. So yeah, it's a really valuable thing, and they all seem to get a lot out of visiting and just being somewhere that's quiet and peaceful. We're also going to have schools, or we've got a focus on getting more school groups in. As we've talked about before, it's vital to get the next generation of kids involved in wildlife, and just to get them to appreciate the wildlife that's on their doorstep. This is a video. That was totally spontaneous. I didn't ask them to do that.
We're going to do it at the end.
And again, so over the next 2 years, we're going to be putting on lots of events. So here are some we've done in the past, but there's going to be lots of events going on, nature-based events, obviously, but things like guided walks, identification sessions, and then a whole load focused on families and kids as well. I can't not mention our volunteers, because they are the ones that carry out all the work that we've talked about. There they are doing lots of brilliant things. They've done, so in 2023, our volunteers did almost 7,000 hours of volunteering, which is brilliant. And yes, we couldn't do exactly, And so none of the work, nothing that I've shown in the presentation would have been possible without, obviously, the help of lots and lots of people. So yes, they're very much appreciated and a very, very big part of the trust and what we do. Very quickly now, we just have also started doing a conservation club for 14 to 18-year-olds. Again, just try and get, you know, more young people interested in nature conservation. And we do community days on a Saturday as well for people that can't come regularly. If anyone is interested in volunteering, we have got lots of roles available. Read them there. Everybody should have a little postcard that has got my contact, all of our contact details on. So if you would like to get involved in any way, just let me know. And here are some QR codes. So if you would like to volunteer, this QR code will take you straight to the volunteering page. And also, if you would like to join our mailing list, the one on the right will take you to a page where you can join our mailing list, and that is how you will find out about all the events and everything that we're going to be doing from now on. One event, just very quickly, we're going to have a kind of post-seminar open day on the 10th of May. So if any of you haven't been to Nosterfield or would like to find out more about the plant nursery and everything we do, obviously I've had to rush through everything and there's a lot more that can be said about it. But if anybody would like to come along then you're more than welcome. And if you sign up to our mailing list, that's how you will hear about that as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Emma, you had the thankless task of going last, which probably means everybody else overran, and you were probably going to be perfectly timed. So forgive me for chasing you a little bit. We will try and finish bang on past, because I know some people have trains. We probably got a chance for just a couple of questions, and then we do have a few thank yous and a little bit of wrapping up to do. And I want to give Simon a chance to say the last word, because I think that's only right. Does anybody want to ask a question? And I think what's really interesting for me is, where does this go next? How do we take that landscape scale ambition that Simon's articulated, and that's underpinned by all of that understanding from David part 1 this morning. So I think it would be interesting to get any thoughts on kind of what you want to see. Yes, chap up there.
A couple of questions, if I could ask. Is water violet still present in this area? Because it used to be on the Fairbanks Nature Reserve in the Aire Valley, and then it was lost from that area and then occurred at Birkin Old Eye, which is an old river course. I just wondered if it was part of the propagations up here. And what are the visiting arrangements for the northern half of the area, and will there be more visitor facilities in the future?
I think if maybe Martin wants to pick up on the botanical question first, and then we'll come to Simon to answer the facilities one.
Yeah, so part of the nursery project has involved establishing propagation facilities for fully aquatic plants. It's actually turned out a bit more difficult. We've had a go at propagating water violet. It is still present at a couple of sites. Staveley Nature Reserve, the YWT Reserve comes to mind. So we can have another go at propagating it. You know, if potentially you would be interested in trying to reintroduce it to the Lower Ure, then keep in touch. We'll see where we get with it. Yeah, we're certainly willing to give that a go.
It's in ditches in the south of Scarborough as well.
Yeah.
When there's the question about the northern area, I'm guessing, is that the northern henge that you're talking about?
The well marshlands.
Okay. No, all right. Okay. On so north of the Thirst Massam Road, you've got the quarry workings. The western end, which is what we call the well wetlands, has been under our management for about 5 years. And that's absolutely accessible via a footpath through the middle of it, and also an additional permissive footpath. The nursery and so on is closed, but if anyone would like to come and visit and find out more about what we're doing, please come along and ask. We'd love to show you.
Thank you, Simon. Any further questions? Okay. Just
one. I mean, you and the team have done such a wonderful job over the years, Simon, and I know your Lower Ure Conservation Trust is going to attempt to be pulled all over the countryside, where do you see the limits?
Oh, crikes. Yeah, no, well, Christopher, thank you for the question. And that's always a difficult one. We've got to do some balancing up. And I suppose it leads through to the question about where do we go in the future. And I think what is so valuable is to have a day like today where we start looking at all the strengths of this amazing landscape. You know, all joking apart, over Blaze's picture of the henges going north to south. Oh gosh, yes, magnesian limestone, not the henges, but the gravel pits are down that line. The southern magnesian limestone is up and down that line. The whole of the henges landscape is of interest. I think in short, I would suggest to you the real hotspot for us to look at is the southern magnesian limestone. And in terms of the historical environment and how we link with it, the henges landscape seems to me to be a no-brainer. I think it's a very understood landscape, misunderstood or not well enough known, let's say, underappreciated. And of those henges that have been mentioned, such as Cannabarn, there's still many of them under the plough. You know, this is an incredibly valuable landscape. And we need to learn to tell the story and appreciate that landscape more. And I think it's that partnership of working together. And I think I can't speak for English Heritage, but I get the feedback from them that they've enjoyed working with us because we've shown them that there is, we're saying these plants have been here for thousands of years, just like the henges. And the archaeologists are scratching around quite often, trying to find a bit of archaeology. There's archaeology there, it's living archaeology. You know, we still have some of that, and it's building on that, appreciating it, and bringing it up to a landscape scale. So hopefully that answers you, Christopher, and the broader question by David.
I think it does, excellent. And I think that brings us nicely to a really neat conclusion. I think there are some thank yous that we want to make. But before I do, just wanted to say, I think it's been an excellent day. It's been really informative. It's been great to sort of get really under the skin of a landscape. It's inspiring, you know, to listen to what the Lower Ure Trust have done. And I think, you know, these partnerships at a landscape scale take time. It takes energy, it takes drive, it takes vision and enthusiasm, and it takes passion. And that doesn't happen overnight. You know, Simon's been going at this for over 20 years, and I know the trustees probably have as well. You know, I think massive congratulations to get to this point. Obviously, you know, the next phase is probably going to be even more exciting. And, you know, I had a little bit of a yippee moment when I saw those pictures of the fen creation. You know, I think, and I visited on Tuesday. I've been a few times over the last few years. And that is really cutting edge work that's been done there. Creation of that priority habitat in that time scale, and it's looking really natural now, is absolutely brilliant. So we now need to sort of turbocharge it and take it to the next level. And this is starting to have impacts beyond this landscape. You know, this has been taken, sharing that learning nationally. You know, if every landscape does this and goes on this journey, this is how we will achieve the targets that we've set by 2042. We need 500,000 hectares of wildlife-rich habitat beyond protected sites. The 30 by 30 target that Simon talked about, yeah, is not going to happen without every landscape like this doing its fair share of delivery, and it will need you guys driving that as partners. So, you know, onwards and upwards. Congratulations, but you know, it's been a really great day. So thank you all. And so I think Joe might want some pictures so all the speakers will need to hang behind. You're not off the hook yet. I think I'm going to hand to Simon actually to say some thank yous, because you know who's put the effort into today beyond you. So I'll hand over to you for the final word. Thank you.
Well, thank you. No, I mean, this is about teamwork. And so I've got a brilliant range of trustees who I'm delighted to say are all here today, including all our founding trustees, which is, says a lot that there's still that affection for the landscape that we've always had. But what's been so exciting, and I have to mention the Prime Minister at this moment in time. Rishi Sunak introduced, and I always get this wrong, the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, which enabled us to employ Emma. And when you suddenly get some really helpful, positive staff like Emma on board to encourage volunteers, a smiling face, how can I help you? That makes all the difference. So, and that's enabled us to work with people like Joe sitting over there, and now, of course, more recently, Amy coming in as our outreach officer from January. We're building a team. That team can only grow because what we're doing is, I think, telling such a positive story. So massive thank you to all the team. Nick, who is just about to leave us as our intern, and to move on to the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust full-time, full-time doing a bit with us as well. And that's been one of the other exciting things to actually to encourage them. But our volunteers are at the centre of it. I have to pick out Laurie and Pan, who were rightly given the High Sheriff's Award recently for their amazing work. Thank you, everybody. A particular thanks to the National Heritage Lottery Fund, who have helped us, and sadly Ben isn't here from Yorkshire Water, but it was primarily Yorkshire Water that have paid for this seminar, and I hope you have all enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you.